Hello guys and welcome back to my channel. So in this week's video I'm really focusing on completing series that I've started because I have a list of series that I have yet to finish and I really want to take them off so that I feel satisfied and happy with myself. A lot of these series I've actually started quite some time ago, whereas some of them I have recently started them, but my focus is on book series where I only have to read the last book before I complete it, and if I finish reading all of those books then I will continue on with the series where I may have started the first book but haven't read the rest of it. The first book that I chose to read is 𝐸𝐻𝑆 Vows, which is the second book to Divine Rivals, the Letters of Enchantment series. To be honest, Divine Rivals was an okay book. I enjoyed it, but I felt like the romance was a bit too rushed and I want more of the chemistry because I just felt like it happened so quickly. But I expect this book to have a little bit of angst, especially from what happened in the first book. To be honest though, when I started reading this, I honestly have forgotten what has happened. I understand the general vibe of it because I remember that, but in terms of the plot, I don't really remember that much, which is why I feel like when it comes to series, I really do have to read them one after each other, otherwise I literally forget everything. But I have been wanting to read this book for a while. I've literally been itching to read it, so hopefully it's a good conclusion to the duology and then I can finally tick it off my list. I'm nearly at the halfway point of 𝐸𝐻𝑆 Vows and I feel like, to be honest, I'm not really connected to the characters, and with this specific trope that this book has, I was so excited to read it because of the ending in the first book, but I feel like I'm not getting the angst that I want. There was a few scenes where I was like, oh my god, the suspense, but then after that I was like, oh, it just happened so quickly and I wanted more of the angst that this certain trope created, and I was not getting that. And to be honest, I feel like I don't really care about the characters or their relationship because it just develops so quickly. And I personally, I think that they're cute, but I also feel like in a way that their chemistry is a bit flat. I do think that the writing is very easy to read. The plot is also very interesting. The whole lore surrounding what's going on with the gods and war and stuff like that is really interesting to read, but I feel like the main focus, which is somewhat kind of the romance, I personally am not really into. Which makes me really sad because if I was really into the romance, I feel like it would make this book a lot more better. I am really enjoying it though, but it's just not something that is wowing me. I'm almost finished with 𝐸𝐻𝑆 Vows and I feel like crying. I was literally tearing up because, oh my god, the scene that we're getting where we're getting the point of views of the different characters before the big thing happens. I want to cry so much. I am actually crying. Like, I'm tearing up. This book, I swear, it makes me so stressed that I had to put it down a couple of times because I was like, I cannot get through this. I feared, okay? There was a lot of suspense. I didn't get any angst, but a lot of suspense. Literally so many scenes I was like, oh my god, they're gonna get caught, they're gonna get caught. I will say the beginning of the book was a little bit slow, and then after the halfway point it did get a lot better, so I'm excited to finish it. I'm gonna power through it and then I'll give you guys my last updates of what I think about this book. I finished reading 𝐸𝐻𝑆 Vows, which, if I'm being honest, when I started the book, I was thinking, oh, this book is going to be a 3 stars, and then I finished it and I was like, you know what, it's a 4 stars. The ending was what did it for me because I felt so emotional while reading it. I cried at certain scenes, which if you've read it, you know what scenes I'm crying over, but I'm really satisfied with the way that it ended because it's happy. It wrapped up really nicely, and I just liked how, I guess, magical this book seemed, especially because of the whole lore of the gods and the divines, I guess. The romance did actually get me when they finally met. I felt like my expectations for the trope in the beginning didn't really live up to what I thought it was going to be, which is why I was kind of disappointed with it. But actually seeing them together and interact with each other, they were actually so cute, just like how much they loved each other. And I feel like I liked this book a lot more than the first book because the first book, in terms of the romance and everything, it was just not doing it for me. So I'm glad that this book, honestly, I loved it, loved the ending, glad that, you know, I enjoyed it, because going into it I was honestly kind of scared. I started reading my next book, which is Queen of Vaults. I started this series last year, and if I'm being honest, I don't really remember what happens in it. I recognize characters' names, but in terms of the plot, there are certain things that I remember, but there are also things where I'm reading it and I'm like, I don't really know what's going on. From my memory, this series is basically about this girl named 𝐸𝐮, or I don't really know if that's how you pronounce her name, but she lives in a very, I guess, like posh place, and then she moves to a more, I guess, rundown city, which is, I think, termed as the city of sin, where it's run by gangs, and it's a very dangerous place. But she goes there in search of her mother who disappeared, and then she meets Levi, who is a gang leader, and she kind of enlists his help because he has a connection to her mother. And then a bunch of wild stuff happens. It's called the Shadow Game series because there is this thing called the Shadow Games where the people in the book have to participate in it, and it's pretty scary because a lot of death and stuff occur. This book has multiple point of views, which is something that I don't really like, especially because sometimes I feel like it's not really needed. And also, half of these characters, it's not that I don't know them because they were, I guess, side characters in the last two books, but I feel like we're not getting that much of the main characters compared to the first two books, so I don't really know how I feel about that. Because I haven't read that much, I can't really say what my impression of it is so far. Okay, so I'm considering whether or not I want to DNF this book. I was basically reading a bunch of low star reviews on Goodreads, and a lot of them kinda explained what I was feeling about this book. First of all, too many point of views, which I mentioned before. I don't like many point of views, and as I said, it's a bunch of point of views from characters that we have in the first two books, but they were side characters, and I also have forgotten who certain characters were. So I think in total we have Harvey, Sophia, Lola. I still don't know how to pronounce her name. I think it's Ennis, but I keep calling her 𝐸𝐮. I don't really know. And Levi. And to be honest, I don't like any of the characters because they are all horrible. The romance in this book as well is not really doing it for me because it's so toxic. We have Ennis and Levi, and basically their relationship in the first book started off well, but to be honest, it wasn't my, I guess, favorite relationship ever in terms of the romance. And then over time their relationship started to get a little bit more toxic, and just, I don't know how to explain it, but the way that it was written is just not the type of romance that I personally like to read. And in this book, basically stuff happens, they betray each other. 𝐸𝐮 want to get closer to Levi again because she loves him, but because she did something in the past where she betrayed him, he can't even be around her anymore. It's really hard to explain without all the context and the spoilery stuff, but it just feels so toxic because she keeps pushing herself onto him when he doesn't really want to be with her anymore. And I just feel like this book so far, it's one of those books that I'm a little bit conflicted about because I can definitely read it and continue on with it. I also feel like we're still at the beginning of the book, but as of right now, it doesn't feel like there's a lot of progress that's going on. But I have started reading another book, which this book was one of my favorite books that I read when I was younger. And when I mean when I was younger, I mean when I was like maybe like 14, 15, which is why I think the issue with a lot of these series is that I started them when I was a lot younger, and now I don't remember anything about it besides the fact that I did enjoy it. But it's the Nemesis. I don't really remember what the first two books are about, if I'm being honest. I know that it's sci-fi. I know that I really loved it, so I am excited to finish it. I've read a little bit of the Nemesis, and so far I'm really enjoying it because the plot is moving quickly. The first half of the book is not super boring, which I'm really glad about, and the romance, there is so much tension between the two characters, especially because of the way their romance evolved from the first book compared to the last book. This book is basically kind of like a sci-fi book. It's set in, I don't know, it's like a dystopian sci-fi world, but basically we have Nemesis, who is a diabolic, which is, they are human, but I think they're manufactured in a way where they can't feel human emotions, so they look like humans but they have more strength compared to them, and diabolics have this, I guess, intense loyalty towards their masters, and they need that love for them to kind of survive. So we have Nemesis and we have Tyrus, who is the Emperor, and it's really interesting to see the progression of his character from the first book to who he is right now, and honestly I'm loving it. I'm just so excited to see how the story continues, but at the same time I'm a little bit scared, if I'm being honest. Unfortunately, I did start reading a manhwa, which I knew I shouldn't have, but I don't know why. I had this intense feeling to read a manhwa and I couldn't resist it, so I will probably finish that whole thing today and then continue on with reading this. I'm at the halfway point and so far I'm really enjoying it. We are basically going around the galaxy stealing spaceships, which so fun, but I find Nemesis' character very interesting because she is made to be emotionless, and it's interesting to see how ruthless she is, but at the same time she has sympathy towards humans and she shows them mercy, but then, you know, they do stuff where she ends up having to kill them. But I'm just interested to see where the story goes because I feel like it could either end in a good way or a bad way. Yesterday I spent the whole day reading the manhwa. It literally took me the whole day, and I thought manhwas would be faster to read, but I don't know why. It was just a slow process. So I'm hoping that I can either finish this book today or just read a good chunk of it and then update you guys tomorrow about my thoughts on it. So this is the last day of the week and I wanted to give you guys my final updates. I finished reading The Nemesis, which I really enjoyed. I love the plot, I love the writing, I love the characters. But if I'm being honest, I didn't really have an emotional connection to the story. For example, with Ruthless Vows, I started it and I was like, this book is okay, but the thing that got me was the ending, which is why I gave it 4 stars. The ending made me super emotional, it made me cry, which is why I really liked it. Whereas with The Nemesis, although I liked it throughout the whole book, there was just nothing about it that really surprised me or made me feel a lot towards the overall story, and I don't really know how I feel about the ending, but I'm glad that I finished reading this trilogy. And overall, I did really enjoy the whole trilogy, so I'm glad that I finally read it. It was worth it, in my opinion. I started reading my next book, which is Bone Cries Dawn. And this is the second book to the Bone Grace duology. I haven't really read that much of it, but if I'm being honest, I feel like there is not that much going on. And this is what I feel about certain books, especially fantasy, where literally nothing goes on in the first half of the book and then everything happens in the second half. So far though, I am okay with reading it. I'm going through it. I'll be honest, this whole entire video, I enjoyed the books that I read, but I felt like I also didn't read as much as I usually would read. I just feel like sometimes I haven't been bothered to pick up the book, and then yesterday, like for 2 days of the week, I spent the whole day reading manhwas. But overall, I'm still happy that, you know, I got to finish some of the series that are on my list. But that's basically it for today's video. I hope you guys enjoyed it. See you guys in another one.